First of all, congratulations to everybody involved in this incredible documentary, and what a gift we all have to have this incredible panel here with us today. First of all, for everybody watching, please show some love to all the documentary makers and to this wonderful, wonderful documentary here in the chat stream. Give us your top 1, 2, 3 takeaways. What was something that really stood out to you? Love to see that in the chat stream. And also, please give a huge shout out and emojis and a warm welcome to this incredible panel. We're about to go into a great discussion. We'll see what starts to show up. But with me right now, we have Andrew Bunnie Huang, the Hacktivist himself. Hi there.
Hi there.
Great to see you. We've got Sean Cross here, also hacker, very close collaborator with Bunnie. Sean, welcome. Great to see you.
Hi.
By the way, I just have to call out, both Bunnie and Sean it's an ungodly hour for them. I think you're both in Singapore, right? So I think they're doing this at 1 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
so thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. We have Ja-naé Duane, our behavioral scientists, and an educational expert here as well. Ja-naé, great to see you. How are you today?
I'm excellent. How are you guys doing?
Oh, super good. And we've got Keith Casey, our experienced software developer and API designer. Keith, welcome. How are you today, sir?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me here today. Looking forward to this.
Excellent. So, all right, everybody, here we're just going to dive straight in. First of all, and I see so many great comments coming through. Lots of love in the chat stream over here. Lots of connections as well, which is really great. So let's just start straight out the gate, and I guess we'll kind of kick off with yourself, Bunnie, if that's okay. Just to start straight out the gate, and this is questions for all the panelists as well. But why would somebody, first of all, want to go through the discomfort of taking technology apart and potentially actually even ending up with a broken thing? Why do it? Let's start right there.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's irresistible. I can't not. I know not everyone's the same way. I think typically the on-ramp to taking stuff apart is it's already broken. I want to fix it, right? And so a lot of times, you have a lot of gear that you've used up, you're going to replace whatever it is. And the first thing I do is before I toss it in the bin, I'll open it up and see what's on the inside. It's a really good learning experience. You learn about all the techniques you need to take apart devices that you do want to use, right? And so then when you actually get to the live fire event, like you don't break it. And then I have this thing I call the rule of threes. If you actually do want to take something apart that's very important, and you're reverse engineering something and you want to make some progress on it, you get 3 of them. One of them, it's just broken. Like you just buy it from the refuse bin, or you get it from someone that's already broken. So you just sacrifice it. You take it apart. You do all the learning. There's no discomfort because it's already broken, right? Mm-hmm. Another one you do your experiments on, so you're doing the mods. And the other one you don't touch at all, because then you have a reference one and you don't feel bad. There's less discomfort because you already have one. So it does require a little more resources to do that. But if you really, really want to get serious, then that's one way to get past that psychological barrier of breaking things at discomfort.
Awesome, amazing. Sean, as a hacker, what are your comments about this as well? Taking things apart, going through the discomfort, and why even get into it in the first place?
Everybody has their own thing that they enjoy doing. Many people went through English class in high school, for example, where during those classes you had to take apart, Shakespeare or Candide or something like that. And from an English perspective, figure out what the author was doing and kind of pick apart various aspects of language. And some people really enjoy doing that. That's why they become English majors. That's why they delve into all the symbolism. I never really enjoyed that when I was in school. I enjoyed having read those books. I enjoy having that cultural history, but I didn't enjoy taking English books apart. What I enjoy is taking physical things apart. And what I get from taking apart and understanding a betrusted device, I think is what somebody who is really into literature gets by taking apart their favorite book. It's getting a closer understanding with a piece of technology, the same way somebody would get a closer understanding of their favorite piece of music or their favorite book or even a dish or something like that.
Mm-hmm. this. I'm gonna pivot here a real quick into this, because I saw in the chat stream so many shout outs about the documentary, that people want to show this to their kids. There was a lot of comments about curiosity. There's a lot of comments about like, we should be doing this in schools, and like really, again, just bravo to all of you. I think you've set something in motion. I mean, I know this is the whole ripple effect, the importance of this. But how important is curiosity these days? Janelle, I'll jump to yourself and Keith on this one, just to kick us off here. How do we create space for curiosity and for discomfort? Like, what can the individual do? Because even for myself, I could imagine those red labels really did stop me. When I see those things, I'm like, you can't do anything. This has inspired me to kind of dig in. But how can we create space for curiosity and discomfort? What are some of the recommendations that you would share? What can the individuals here do, and how can they create that ripple effect for themselves and their families and friends?
Do you want me to start, or do you want Keith to start?
Yeah, Ja-naé, why don't you jump in there, and then we can ask Keith too.
Yeah, so I think that there's a few ways. I mean, I think we were back channeling for the audience around my 5-year-old son, and when I think about the curiosity that he just naturally has, that we as children naturally have. I think about Bunnie's story. And I just thought about how my husband tells the story of how he took the TV apart, drove his father crazy, and they were out of a TV for close to a year. But our children naturally have this. What happens is that along the way, both our educational system, the confines of and the parameters that we as parents put on children, I will say that systemically rather, just our culture also puts curiosity either in a box or squishes it. And so one of the things that I think that we could do early on, I'll take first the parent perspective, is I think that if you either are a parent and or you have, I'll say, frequent access to children, how can you allow them to start to break open things? How can you allow them to take something and go, here, doesn't matter what the consequences are, just go open this up, explore it, tell me what you find. And then once that happens, great. Now, let's imagine different ways in which you could put this together and explore that. And then I move over to, as a college professor, I think about the ways in which we incorporate hackathons into our curriculum, or things that I try to do at colleges that I teach at, where it's both the technology, but it's also around thinking of solutions of the future as we're thinking about sort of our big world problems. So it creates that space to get back something that we have inherently lost as we've started to grow up. And then I think that there's tons of opportunities also to collaborate with organizations, but I'll actually turn it over to Keith for that.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I avoided many warranties in my time, so I felt bonded with Bunnie at that moment in the documentary. I got in trouble a number of times. But also as a parent, I really have the perspective of we need to figure out how to introduce more curiosity. You keep using the word discomfort about talking about hacking and exploring and figuring out the boundaries. That rubs me the wrong way. I think we need to get past discomfort and we need to go towards full-blown being wrong. Great. Being wrong hurts, yes, but I'd rather be wrong for as short a time as possible and figure out a right answer as quickly as possible. And I think we need to encourage that across society. I think we need to encourage that as we look at the problems facing us. With kids, we need to teach them that being wrong is totally fine. It happens. If you're not pushing boundaries, you're never going to be wrong. We don't even know where the boundaries are in so many areas at this point. That red label ends up being this big, scary boundary. When realistically, 99.9% of the time, what's it going to do? Absolutely nothing. It's just there to deter you. So, I mean, I always try and teach my boys of understanding why is there a boundary there? Is it real? Is this going to get you in trouble? Or is this just for courtesy's sake or respect's sake or something like that? And understanding that there's some boundaries that we don't cross in certain areas, but there's some that we need to push and we need to understand why. So I think whenever possible, if we could toss out the assumptions, understand what the boundaries really are, and kind of explore from there, I think it's vital for us to do.
Thank you. And I want to keep this open for, we've got a couple of things going now. We've got some curiosity questions. We've got that piece of being wrong and discomfort going. There's also something interesting I'm seeing again in the chat stream here about how education systems are really, it's almost like since the pandemic, almost like stifling that. And I also think in corporate culture, Ja-naé, you and I talk a lot about this at times, is there's this new concept of like fail fast. Now people are trying to be taught how to fail, which I think is to get it wrong, because that's where we actually learn. I'm very curious, Keith, if I could stick with you and then obviously open up to Bunnie and Sean and the rest as well. But just when we talk about exploring boundaries, where does, because there's some questions in the chat about, my right to explore, where does my right to explore push on the limits of others' IP? What are the implications of that? Like, because because this is now we're getting into the nuance of the real conversation that people are asking, like, when is it right? When is it wrong? When are we? So let's explore boundaries, but how do we manage the pushing up on those limits of other IP? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, so this is a reasoned answer, not necessarily a legal answer.
Disclaimer, everybody.
Yeah.
These are just thoughts and opinions.
Yes, my perspective is really, if it's a device that's sitting on your desk, and that's the extent of it, like, man, do what you want. It's your device. You bought it supposedly. Like it needs to be yours to be able to play with. My perspective is, if this is connected to my network, if it's doing things, if it's making a request outside my network, at some level, I'm responsible for it legally, and I need to know what it's doing. I need to have some understanding of what actions it's taking, from my IP address, if nothing else. So I take that. Now, when you start crossing like if you, instead of hacking the Xbox, if you hacked Xbox Live, a service which is hosted elsewhere, like you've probably crossed the line. You've probably gotten into trouble at that point. I definitely don't recommend doing that with a service. But for the device sitting on your desk, man, have fun, explore it. I like Bunnie's model of buying 3. I'm going to definitely adopt that now. I wish she'd told me that like 20 years ago. Thanks.
Well, the trick is not to buy 3. The trick is to get a broken one, so one's free.
Yeah. Yes.
And maybe borrow your friends for the one that works. And you actually buy 1 at the end of the day, or maybe 2, right? 1.5. Kind of.
Good idea. Thank you. I'm going to totally steal that. Thank you.
Bunnie, thoughts on the same question? Just rights to explore, because I mean, this is a movement that's been begun with the Hacktivist, right? And there's so many people here saying, I wish I could grow up to be like you. In the chat stream, there's like, I think you're sparking a sense of curiosity and a sense of questioning, which was the real intent here as well. So what are your thoughts around this?
I mean, I very similar to Keith. I think what happens in the privacy of your own home is, I mean, it's fine, right? Like there are technically laws on the book that are basically paper tigers designed to scare. Again, this is not legal advice, right? But it's similar to those the whatever the blue laws in Massachusetts that like you can't hold hands after the dark, sodomy is illegal, that kind of thing. But like no one ever really actually puts a case out on that sort of thing. It's there, and maybe someone will put in a set of charges they really want to get after you. But the thing about a lot of these statutes that exist that put legal and criminal potential around sort of taking things apart is that what we found in the past couple decades is that if you're doing it in the privacy of your home, and you're generally doing it to learn, for interoperability, for research, these types of things, no rights holder has been willing to actually take that case to court, because the scariness of the existence of the law does all the trick of keeping people from breaking the labels, right? It's just that, ooh, it might be illegal, it might be a problem, right? That risk is what deters us from it. But when someone actually goes and does something, sure, they could come. I mean, there's been like professors and research, institutes that have gone and done this, and suits are filed and then dropped, because when the moment they see that binding precedent may be set that could basically ruin the party for all the people who benefit from those statutes. They don't want to see it through at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, like, I really think if you bought it with your own money, you own it, right? It's yours. Take it apart, learn about it, do what you want with it. There's certain boundaries and things about sharing, and when you start getting into the point of like putting online and trafficking the information or these types of things, it gets a little more hairy. But there are now norms around disclosure. There's things around publication. There's some precedent. They're not legally binding. Like no one lawyer is going to say like you definitely won't get sued. But I think there's a what you see is there's a spectrum of risks now, and we're starting to see that lay of the land, that sort of shape of things, and really at the end of the day, I think I actually, the way to make it more safe to do this is for more of us to do it. At the end of the day, if we all do it and we all think it's fine to do it, then society, at least society as I grew up in and existed, starts to accept that as like the broad norm, and that's the way we can eventually sort of make that very okay, as opposed to be like, oh, we have to be worried about these things. Let's stop, and let's as a society, sort of get scared by the paper tiger or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm paraphrasing, are we saying let's democratize hacking?
Yeah, or not even democratize. I mean, hacking doesn't. You just do it. Like yeah. It's not even. It's let's make it a movement. Let's make it a thing that everyone does. Let's just. There's no barriers to like learning. No barriers to curiosity. No barriers to innovation. Permissionless curiosity to explore these types of things. That should just be. That was nature when we grew up. Like evolved. Like in the woods or something like this. No one says, "Oh, you can't touch the fire." Because oh, that's someone's, it might be dangerous or wherever it is. After the fire went out, you take some embers and you mix it with some leaves and you've got a new fire or something like this. There wasn't anyone, passing fire laws and like saying you had to have a pit and a radius or whatever. We figured it out eventually that you had to have things like this. But that curiosity is what gets us to technology. And of course, the other half of it is that, we should also teach people about ethics and thinking about like the role of the technologist and how we do these types of things. So it's not like you just go and just knock down the walls and split atoms and don't worry about what happens on the other end. We as technologists bear a huge responsibility for the outcome of these things. That's the other half that we have to learn. But I don't think that's a thing that I feel comfortable having legislators and lobbyists decide for me, right? I think we should teach kids at a young age, teach us at a young age how to think about these things, read about them, and also like believe in the curiosity and the general sort of, I say, that semi-utopia of like curiosity and the human spirit guiding us through this.
Thank you. There's an interesting connection in the chat stream. I'm not sure if you're all getting to see that, but there's a connection to the idea of open source and internet and putting things out there. And the more we can put things out there, I think that's an interesting one, even in a corporate culture that we're noticing. If you can take the stigma out of the fail or the wrong and say, hey, look, I experimented. I think everything that you do, putting things online and showing when things work and don't work, and like looking at all the ways you've tried something where it hasn't worked, but it also has worked. I think that's a fascinating sort of connection, that the more people that can do that, it takes the sting. I would imagine it takes the sting out of it, and it also changes the way I think the audience is making connections that would change the way that people might make things, or even how they go about exposing that or opening that up to public. I'm very curious, Sean. I'll jump to you for a second to kick us off on this one. Who are we putting our trust into, and should we be trusting them in terms of the tech makers? And I got a follow-up tech question, but here's the thing that's interesting. We've got these laws, we're talking about curiosity, we're talking about bypassing some tape, we're talking about, and again, no illegal implications here, no legal advice, but what we're saying here is, who are we actually putting our trust into? Because there was a fascinating discussion we had in preparation for this panel, right? Which was like, there was a very narrow band of people that kind of get to know what's happening, so and how things are made and where things are sourced from. But who are we putting our trust into? Should we be trusting them? Thoughts on that, Sean, to kick us off?
Well, yeah, I would say that a lot of people, even in the big companies that we're supposed to be trusting, don't actually know what it is they're doing. It's kind of like, you know, the apocryphal story about the Thanksgiving ham, where they would always cut off the front and the end of the ham. And, you know, why do you do that? Well, it's because my mother did it. And why did she do it? And they go and ask her, and they find out it's because her oven was too short. And so they had to trim off the edges to get it to fit. So I think we actually get a lot of this in modern tech companies, where they do things because it's always worked. You particularly get this in hardware companies, where they validate a chip once, it works, they're able to make billions of them. They might be able to get to tune it a little bit better, but nobody actually knows what is going on the inside of these things. And it's kind of interesting when you, as a hacker, actually get to understand these parts better than the people who sell them and are, in theory, experts in the system, just because they've forgotten. There's been a lot of institutional knowledge forgetting that. And you know, that's one of the values where hackers can actually be useful, because we enjoy doing this for fun. We enjoy understanding as much as we can about it. And we will uncover all sorts of side effects that you have forgotten, and ways you can adjust and use technology to do something interesting. Now, I think the question is, if I'm correct, is more about, you know, privacy and interoperability and things like that, because I know that's primarily what this is about. And you know, even then, a lot of the non-interoperability barriers that they put in place aren't necessarily out of malice. Sometimes it's out of malice to try and block out competitors and interoperability, but more often than not, it's just that they didn't think to set up interoperability. It's more out of neglect than anything else. And so oftentimes what we want to do isn't even part of their core business model, and we're just more forgotten than anything else.
That's an interesting one. A corporate business model that allows you to, incentivizes you to, for lack of a better term right now, hack their stuff. You know, to break it and explore it. That would be really fascinating. Like,
but why not, right? Like, that's
mud arm, right? Like a whole.
I mean, if we have play to earn models, if we have invest to earn models, if we're really shifting to look at the economics and incentives within organizations in a different way, then why not hack to earn? I mean, that to me is a no-brainer.
Wow.
And you know, and Sean, you make some really great points. Working within and with organizations around trying to understand the black boxes that they have created, and they don't know. Many individuals within organizations don't actually know what they're building, and some of it's institutional knowledge that's lost. But I would also say that the way in which organizations build does not necessarily take a holistic approach. And so you may have your dev team working on one part of a product and a whole other dev team working on another part of a product, and they don't necessarily talk to one another. And those are just the developers. You know, that doesn't even include, or I'm not including in that example, product management and or other members of IT that might be a part of that process. So I think there is a bit of that institutional knowledge loss, but I also think there's a bit of that fear of, well, you know, I also don't want to look vulnerable or
Right.
show that I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
And so that gets back to, you know, a large part of, you know, how do we look at hacking as a skill that ends up being something that we push to explore early on, and also that we embrace, so that when it comes time to work within organizations, and it doesn't matter how young or old you are, you feel, and there is that culture of acceptance to do some of that that exploration. So.
Quick reframe, keeping that dialogue going, because I'd be very curious to hear from yourself, Bunnie and Keith as well. There's trust. I see in the chat stream as well. And I just want to give a shout out to all the participants here. Incredibly engaging conversation. Really, really amazing. I really hope we can keep this chat stream and transcribe it, or put it, just put it back out there for anybody that misses it. There's some really good things going on here. So thank you for everybody for being so engaging. The question of trust is an interesting one. Okay, so I asked you just now, like, who are we putting our trust into, and should we trust? How could we, what would we have to see or experience to have our trust in these organizations increase? So what could be some things that they could do? Because, okay, now we're a little bit of invention, right? As you were just saying, if we're talking about like hack to earn, like there's some really interesting things. What would, with this team here, this panel, what would increase your trust? What would have to happen? What would you have to see going on to increase your trust in the system of product development and technology and all those kinds of things? Very, very curious. And anybody, please jump in. I won't direct this in any way.
Yeah, I'll throw out one thing first. I think we need to see a radical rethinking for most of these organizations. I mean, too many of them have the business model of advertising, where they want to collect everything. Right. They want to repackage and sell our data to absolutely everyone for everything. And that started with, likes and preferences and dislikes and things like that. But it's now moving on to location data, and there's potential for like healthcare data and everything like that. So I think we need to see some, not necessarily open standards, but a ton of transparency around what they're doing, what they're collecting, what they're doing with it, who they have access, or who has access to it, what those organizations are doing with it, and everything along those lines. Frankly, at this point, I'm very skeptical of every organization involved there. So I don't trust any of them at all. I use a Chrome plugin and Brave plugin and everything that clicks on literally every ad that shows up in my browser, just to completely munge all the data they have about me. So last time I checked, I was a 75-year-old man, woman, pregnant, in college, interested in children's toys. Like I think until they prove themselves and go with some radical transparency and showing us some of the algorithms involved, I don't trust them at all.
Well, Keith, if you could share for the audience, what's the name of this app? I think everybody probably wants to use.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the comments, but it's called Ad Nauseam. It's blocked from the Chrome store for obvious reasons, but it's a fantastic way to munge all your data. I'll find a link. I'll share it here momentarily.
Well, you're looking great for a 75-year-old, by the way. I just have to call that up. So team, Bunnie, Sean, Ja-naé, what would you have to see in the world or experience from either whether it's manufacturers or corporations or just people putting things into the world in order to increase your trust? And I see in the chat stream there's some wonderful discussions already opening up about that too. Who'd like to go next?
Yeah, I think the word that Keith used is transparency, right? At the end of the day, light is the best disinfectant, and there needs to be a lot more transparency. I personally am very concerned on the hardware side of things, and transparency, really goes just all the way back. And it touches on not just like the designs, but also what's the firmware, what the bootloaders are like, what the blobs are, but also things like, where are you sourcing materials from? Where's your tantalum come from? Are they conflict minerals? Where your device is being manufactured? You'd be shocked how many times they make crisscrosses across the world for different packaging steps and what types of thing. And when you have that amount of, if you get a little more of that transparency out there, I think what people are afraid of when they give that transparency is they give up their secrets, their competitive advantages, these types of things, right? But I think there's a lot of things to be gained by also us looking at each other and be like, oh, actually, we have common problems. Maybe we can actually solve these by working together. We can be more efficient, more green, more fair, more open, these types of things. And there's still ways to protect their economies of scale are real. You could give me the entire bill of materials and designs for an iPhone. I'm not going to be able to compete with Apple building an iPhone. I just can't, right? I don't have the scale of Apple. I don't have the tooling. I don't have the knowledge or the technology. But if you give me all that information, I can actually do an analysis at least of the device and know more of what's going on inside of it, right? So there is I think there's a real advantage to these types of things. And then, the problem is, of course, once things leave your device and go into the cloud, yeah, all bets are off at that point in time. And so I think there's also, another sort of theme of things we should teach kids, the birds, the bees, and the private keys, right? Like they need to learn about what their secrets are, what are protected by the actual secrets, and actual learning that when they put stuff in the cloud, it's out there, right? I mean, it's going to come back to you in 20 years and you're going to go do a job hunt or something like this, and you're going to have some photos or whatever it is, and you're just going to have to deal with that particular thing, or how to manage an online persona, or how to these are like life skills that we need to have now against an increasingly adversarial sort of internet ecosystem that wants to, again, monetize you, get metrics around you, do things and so we have to teach people how to have a defensive posture in that. And more transparency is good. Like if we can actually trust them that they're doing what they're saying, that'd be awesome. But I think it starts again from having a root of trust. And so that's why, as a hardware person, I always go back to, I want to know that at least the code I'm running is the code I think I'm running. That gives me, a point at which I can start to hang, a little piton I could put in the rock face to start the climb to something different. Without that root of trust, then it doesn't matter. They can just move the mountain someplace else, and then I'm lost again, right? And so that's that. And so a lot of what I'm focused on, what Sean's focused on in our Precursor and Be Trusted project is trying to just put that first anchor in the mountain so that we can find our way to sort of ground truth.
Yeah, and I'll flip it as we're asking, what do we need to see to increase trust? There's some questions in the chat stream that to say, but what are the long-term consequences should tech and these behaviors remain the way it is, not being transparent? What's the effect of if we're doing more of the same? So it's like, what would we need to see to improve trust? But what would happen if it just continues exactly like the picture that you're painting? Just curious to comments there from the panel. Who'd love to jump in there?
I have opinions.
Great.
or do you want to? I see Sean, you're muted. Why don't you? I'll stop hugging the floor. So I'll let you go.
No. It's, one of the things I would say is that if you, one of the famous things that the internet is really good for is routing around problems. If there's a problem with a node on the internet, the traffic will be routed around it automatically. And it's the same thing with trust. If you are closed and you don't release information about your product, then you will become no longer relevant. If you have too many laws that make it restrictive for new players to enter a market, if you have this Byzantine system, to get your product out there, and once it's out there, you have this incredibly difficult system of certifications, then you're going to make that market less appealing for innovative products, and they will start going elsewhere. You see this happen with chips. For example, many Chinese companies have been banned from building or buying integrated circuits, and they've been blocked from having shuttle runs on some of the major wafer foundries. And in response, they are developing their own version of this intellectual property, which they're not going to share back. And so by having these rules and regulations in one area, it's becoming a less appealing market, and other people are able to develop something that they're not going to open up either. So in this sense, the more open market has more benefit to everyone, whereas the closed market is only beneficial to the closed market.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Bunnie, you were about to say.
Yeah, I mean, Sean there's a really interesting point there he's making about the whole thing. Maybe lose my train of thought. give me a second. Give me a second.
Sure. So we were talking about what do we need to see to increase trust, but what are the consequences if we do not change? Continue the way they are with little transparency.
Right. I mean, I think the problem with the lack of transparency fundamentally is that I worry that we start to think that technology is magic, right? So I have a box. I don't know how it works. I don't know what it does. It's broken. I can only go to one place to fix it. I can only go to one provider to read the data. All my contacts, my emails, everything is in this one cloud service, right? And by the way, they just shut me out for some reason. Like my whole life is just gone. My photos of kids, everything. Like, these you hear stories of this happening. And so that's kind of, those are sort of, I find them as cautionary tales of what happens if you just go too far into like closed ecosystems. And I don't say that, I don't think that everyone needs to know how to spin up their own private cloud. That's not a thing that we have to teach kids how to do. But we need to teach them is that there's a trail of breadcrumbs they can follow to do these things, or they have friends that can do it. They need to be within some radius in their social circle to know that, like, if they're being abused, from a terms of use standpoint, if they're being locked in a corner or something like this, they have a place to go. It's not like a hard religion where you go to hell if you don't buy from your favorite vendor or something like this, and all your all your stuff is taken away. And so really just trying to avoid. And I find it really a little disconcerting how much people use the word magic to describe technology these days. So many things are just magical and they're amazing. And there's a lot of effort that goes in on the marketing side to make things, we remove the screws from things because we find them, it's less like magical if I see screws on something versus, it's like bonded together with adhesive. How did it come apart? How does it go together? I don't know. It's like a piece of glass, right? So there's a whole aesthetic around the magic that makes you want to pay more for it. That drives more incentives to do this. It makes you look cooler, whatever it is. And I think that that is potentially a bit of a dangerous trend because it lends us to the point where we're now part of a church and we can't get out of it because we can't find the exit anymore.
Yeah, I want to riff off of that because I think we need to, treating the technology as magic is dangerous because we've seen all kinds of scenarios where, getting shut out of your service loses your games, your books, your movies, all this sort of stuff. I know he's a very polarizing figure, but Alex Jones, part of the lawsuit that went against him recently is because he was forced to do discovery and he had to turn over his Gmail, but Google had blocked him out. So part of the settlement against him was the fact that he couldn't get access to his data that was no longer or ever his data. So we've got like real serious like legal consequences coming from some of these things, and we need to stop thinking of our technology as cathedrals and start thinking of it as playgrounds. What can we do? What can we explore? How can we break things? When we fall down and we bruise our knee, how do we get it back up and figure out how to do it the right way? I mean, I've got kids and I want them to think of this as another thing to play with, another thing to explore, and see what happens with it.
So what I'd like to highlight is the fact that what we see, or what I'm hearing even from the panel, is we have a bifurcation, right? Like we have individuals who are really looking to push for this transparency and hold these companies accountable. But then we also have individuals who do see it as magic, but I'd say even more so, they're trained to be lazy, right? They're trained not to ask. And I think that the more that we can educate the masses around what it is, what their data is, what their abilities are as an individual, even if they don't have any coding experience. Like I think that it comes down to that base level education that can really start to bridge the gap between this bifurcation of camps that we have right now.
There's it's interesting that somebody had a comment here around which is an interesting piece around data, which is we need a new United Nations Declaration of Human Rights that covers our right for transparency and privacy. It'd be interesting that if in the future is our data and a human right. I think that's kind of an interesting place to go. It's not just a thing. it becomes an extension of who we are. I'm sure you want to comment on that too, but I want to riff on one other question here, because you were getting into this piece of how sustainable is it to keep the tech that we currently have? And what's the biggest opportunity to actually shift the current system? What could that look like? How sustainable is this for people to keep making the things the way they are and sourcing them the way they are and developing the way they are? All the stuff that we're really talking about, how things are created and stored, and how sustainable is that? And is there an opportunity to shift the system, and what could that shift look like?
So,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Bunnie, go ahead.
Okay, I'll start with my, sorry. So, you know, the angle I took on this question was when the pandemic first happened, we didn't know how bad COVID would be. I asked, what percentage of population can we lose before we forget how to make technology anymore, right? Like, you know, like one in how many people? And when I worked through sort of like the chart of like, you know, the number of specialties that are required to run some of the very bespoke single machines that produce our best technology, right? That it's actually not that many people that we have to lose before we can't make certain types of chips anymore. So like up until like last year, something like that, those really high-end chips that TSMC is putting out, there's only like 50 steppers or something like this in the whole world that can produce those chips, and they're made by one company, right? And there's like a small team of PhD engineers who know how to actually run those machines, right? And then I sometimes go to these conferences for chip design, and I'm like, well, you know, if this hotel collapsed right now, we just wouldn't. There's no recovery. Like there's like everyone I know who knows how to design this particular type of circuit that's important for every kind of chip is basically under this roof. And there's a lot of stuff that isn't put into the books. It's like sort of this trade knowledge that sort of exists, this apprenticeship that happens, right? And so I think we're already at a point where if we had another crisis, or if, in particularly because there's strong geographic concentrations of people in particular areas, if a event happened in a particular region, we could end up just losing a section of technology, right? And this is not without precedent before. I mean, we've had different ages of technology go by. So, you know, I mentioned this earlier, like the Bronze Age, one of the questions of how did the Bronze Age end, right? Well, you know, tin is a thing that is only sourced in very, very small parts of the world, and it wasn't available in most of Europe. It had to be traded through these crazy trade routes. And one of the theories is like those trade routes were affected by climate change or whatever it is, some famine, whatever it is, and the tin wasn't available, and the Bronze Age kind of came to an end because they couldn't get that thing anymore, right? And so you have like these things that were dug out of the ocean, like the Antikythera mechanism. I always butcher the name. I think maybe you know what I'm talking about, is this bronze thing that has these gears on it that can sort of show where the planets are, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you know, honestly, as an engineer, I look at something like that, I'm like, that's not a one-off. That's not a thing that was made for one rich person. There was knowledge on how to make gears at like millimeter precision repeatedly somewhere in antiquity, and that is all lost. It is so lost we don't even know where to find it anymore, right? Like, you know, everything has been eroded, and probably what happened actually when that workshop shut down for a reason, everyone's like, oh crap, we can't get these gears anymore. We're going to go ahead and take apart all the working ones and use them to fix the existing ones, and eventually those will break and they'll melt them down to make kitchenware because they need them. And eventually they'll melt those things down and make coinage because they have to have an economy. And eventually they just, you know, everything's lost. And you have like zero instances of this technology anymore because the only one we could find was safely at the bottom of the ocean. That was the only one that we couldn't get to actually melt down to recover. So you know, if we had a situation where like, you know, we couldn't, for whatever reason, like say Taiwan had some issue and those fabs went away, I think, you know, I don't think we would come back from that very quickly. We may actually very quickly go to a scenario where we're just cannibalizing equipment after equipment to keep the clouds going. Eventually cannibalize our gaming machines to keep our data going in the businesses, there'll be laws passed, whatever it is. And it'd be too hard for us to catch up on that. You'd have geopolitical conflict, you have all these types of things. And so, you know, do we have the robustness? Do we have the ability, systemic ability to handle these types of shocks? I think we're skating that line. And part of the reason I can say that is because one of the reasons why we're building Precursor and Be Trusted, one of the things I want to ask is, what is the most complex thing a small team of people like me and Sean can build and fully understand everything that goes inside? And from the standpoint of the complexity of what you get in your smartphone versus what we're building in this device, they're night and day, right? This thing, you look at, it's like this black and white screen that's, kind of like a Palm Pilot from 2005 or something like this. And part of the reason is there's a limit on the complexity of what, we can understand as individuals, right? And to be able to audit and put together. And we need to do more to bring out transparency, to get more people involved in the conversation. So if one of us happens to one of us, like, other people can take over and just naturally, like, oh, we have like 10 different sources for chips. We have 10 different sources for circuit boards. Everyone knows a guy who does packaging. Everyone knows a guy who knows how to run a cloud service, right? It's not like these, like, I have to, like, I don't know, like, call up my friend's second daughter, cousin, whatever it is, and maybe they can get me an intro to some guy who can get me a wafer run on the latest fab or something like this. I mean, I think we are in a very tenuous situation right now. So I'll get off that soapbox.
No, I think that's a super important soapbox. My first job out of college was at the Library of Congress, working on their digital archiving project. Basically, the ultimate geek question of how much data is in the Library of Congress. And I'll never forget, my boss walked in one day. This is a presentation to the Librarian of Congress, because yes, there is a Librarian of Congress. And he walked in with two things. He had a captain's logbook from his personal collection that was 250 years old. And it was a beautiful leather bound, aged thing. And he said, this I can pick up and read at any time. And his other hand, he pulled out an 8-inch floppy disk. And he said, this is lost. One of these is 250 years old, and one of these is 20 years old. Wow. If we're not thinking about the data, how we store this information long term, not just 5 years, but 50, 100, 1,000 years. If we're not storing this in a way that's accessible to the next generation, it's all lost. We might as well not have it. And that's what I spent the first 3 years of my career was doing. When Bunnie was hacking Xboxes, I was trying to figure out that side of things. So I have a deep appreciation for this. And whether we're talking about hardware or software or data, it's all the exact same problem. We need to think about, how do we get access to this? How do we get access when the devices this runs on go away?
Mm-hmm. There's some questions. There's a couple questions that are coming in, which I think are really connected to this conversation. And I don't want to veer us too far of Sean, Ja-naé, if you've got other comments on this too, on this topic. But there's the question is, what are the fundamentals? What's the base level of education to actually start to understand this, like understand tech? And I think one that's connected to that is, what is are people's agency? How can people get agency over their own data, their own equipment, those kinds of things? So how do they start to learn this? If we totally agree and just coming at this, like, I'm fascinated, but also maybe you've just painted a picture of the future, which is like, wow, that's kind of scary, and I feel like I need to get better control over my own stuff. So where do I start to learn? And how do I start getting agency of my thing? So it isn't in the hands of, like, I think you mentioned earlier, a switch goes off, or it just gets blocked, or I get shut out of all my stuff, and I don't have it in leather-bound, beautiful books anymore. It's just, it could be lost. I could be lost. Where do we start education-wise? How do we start to build agency? Who'd love to jump in on that one? Ja-naé, shall we start with you being the professor?
I was going to say, start with the gentleman, because they would know better than I would, right? I mean, as someone who doesn't come to it in that way, all that I can do is do what I'm doing now. And so part of what I want to do is actually learn from these three, or what are other ways that I can help to do that. So I go back to the initial question and sort of how we kicked off this conversation. I think that it does start with just breaking crap open and starting to explore it yourself, and or a child. It doesn't matter, right? And I think that it's that almost visceral act of putting your hands on something and saying, all right, what does this look like? Then I think it's about creating safe spaces for folks to do that. And that's, at least within the work that I've done, being able to provide that space within an education system as well as within corporations, so that even if they're doing penetration testing, like, what does that mean, right? Like, how do you start to do that? What are some ways in which you can explore that? Or taking if you're within an organization, like, what is a project or a product rather that's laggard, right? It's going to be sunsetted. Great. Well, how can we explore the components of this and try to figure out different ways in which we can use those components? Again, when we think about sort of the sustainability of tech, I think part of what we need to do is, instead of just assuming that we need to do the same process that we've been doing, what are some ways in which we can reimagine some of the technology that we have and the uses that we have for them. But again, I think these gentlemen are actually better people to ask, so I will turn it over to them.
Thanks, Ja-naé. And just as we are transferring, a wonderful connections being made. There's a few interesting connections here. Someone was saying, what if we switched everything, all technology, off for 24 hours or 48 hours, and you could actually see what life is like, just to bring it into the center of awareness? And then someone else here said, computer unusability and not usability. So the reverse effect of reliance. Anyway, just some really great connections. But again, to the gentleman, where do we start learning, and how do we gain more agency?
My quip on the turning off all the computers is like, sometimes I look at the coronal mass ejections that come from the sun and the history of them, and we haven't had a coronal mass ejection of a scale that can bring down the power grids in modern times. It's not the thing that couldn't happen, so you might get your wish, and it might be longer than 4 hours. So, anyways,
what is that? Like a lunar flare or something? One of those.
Sometimes the sun has sunspots, and it just burps up a bunch of particles that come up the Earth, and they induce very high fields inside the atmosphere around the Earth, and the magnetic fields will actually go through the power cables. They're huge, basically huge coils on the Earth, and they'll create a surge that can basically, early on in the 8 days of the telegraph, they have one of those, and it caused some trouble for the telegraph operators. But all they had were telegraphs back then. So
wow,
we have a different situation now if that were to go on.
So be careful what we wish for. The universe might just respond.
Yeah, it could happen. It's not inconceivable. It's not. I mean, I'm starting to sound like one of those guys who, like, sits on the fringe of things. But
I think there's a movie in that, wasn't it? Escape from LA or something, where the whole world, like, everything just switched off, and the whole world lost its data or lost its ability to do things. Anyway, so learning and agency, my friends.
Right. Yeah. So from the standpoint of there's a question about the education level necessary to sort of approach this stuff. The one factor I'd like to put out there is that everything inside a computer, everything that's engineered was made by humans, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to get into biology, there's a different bar of education because there's stuff we don't understand that happens inside the human body, and a lot of processes that are very hard to get into, and we don't know the answers to. Fundamentally, every single thing every gadget we have, there is a blueprint for that, and it was drawn by a human. I mean, maybe more and more increasingly people are using AI to sort of put it in. So there's a little bit of a modulus with the sort of ML era coming along. But up until at least very recently, I could assert that everything was understandable by a person because it was designed by a person, right? And so you don't have to have any education to take apart a physical object and learn about snap hooks, and you get some intuition for the strength of ABS and how the hooks come together again, and you see these innovative little mechanisms about how the pushers and the buttons and these sorts of things work, right? And that, when I had to go and do injection molding and do snap hooks, there wasn't a book I could read about it, really. I mean, there was some guys who had some finite element analysis and whatever crap, and no one ever does that, right? You talk to the guys who actually do it, it's like, you just sort of put together, you get intuition, you just build it, right? I mean, like that's fundamentally the truth of a lot of the stuff in engineering, is that all that education I had with the physics and tensile strength and whatever it is, just go to the workshop and just grind it out, or take one apart and see how it goes, right? And so there's a ton of just intuition about the world and understanding that we can get from and what happens is when you get that intuition, the education is easier, right? When you try to cram things into people's head without having touched the parts or have some intuition for how it goes, it's so abstract. You don't know why you're learning it. You know, you can't connect the dots. But if you have something, you're like, huh, why'd they do this? And someone says, oh, they did that because of this other thing. If you learn this model of how it works, you could extrapolate to an even farther place out. You go, oh, I get it now. I know why I'm learning this. And now you have an incentive to go ahead and learn these more abstract principles at the end of the day. So I think that the core answer to that question is any age, any place you can start, because all this engineering stuff made by us, right? This is not, we're not talking about biology where we don't know the answers to it. It's made by humans at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. Sean, thoughts on where to start, how to get educated, how to get agency?
I think the single biggest hurdle is making people want to care. I mean, it's the same problem that we have in security where people go, you know, why would I protect my data? I've got nothing to hide. It's because they don't know that this is something that they should be interested in and they should be wary of. I mean, it's the same. You could tell somebody, you know, I'm going to take you to a factory, you know, but Bunnie and I go to factories all the time. Well, we could when we can go to China. And a lot of times the factory bosses, they think that their factory is the most boring thing in the world, which is the exact opposite of how we feel about it. You know, they just want to have us drink tea in their office. Like, no, we want to go see the machine that's making sanitary pads. You know, that is a cool machine. And you know, we have this drive to go learning about this. We have this drive to want to understand how our privacy and how our data is protected by these massive corporations. But a lot of people, they just go, you know, it would be easier if I just signed up for a Gmail account and did everything through that, because they don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about it. I can you know, go do my knitting or go do you know, whatever it is I want to do and not have to worry about it, because fundamentally it's not a thing that I'm interested in. So I think the single biggest thing that we could do to get people to care is to tell them why and show them why it's important to care, and how this is not just something you want to do for a hobby. This is something that's going to matter more and more as time goes on and as these services become more important to our daily lives.
Yeah. I think one, I don't know how effective this is, but I'll just like kind of float out there. One angle that I used to look at motivating myself for agency is I think about my digital estate. In other words, like when I pass, how do I pass on the rights to the things I have to the next generation? Like I'm gone. My passwords are locked, right? Does all that data I have, do all the photos I have, do all the email I have, does all the cryptocurrency, do all the bank accounts I have just go, right? You know, what happens to my GitHub account, all these types of things, right? And so when you look at it from the standpoint of like, I want to make sure that my successors can have access to things I care about, then the investment you have to make, the inconvenience you go through to back things up, to create local copies, to make sure that they're accessible, and to secure them and lock them down, make a lot more sense. It's not as abstract, to me at least, when I think about it from the standpoint of how do I preserve my digital estate for, you know, I don't have children, but like my niece or my successor or whoever it may be, right? And I find some people when I put it that way, they go, oh, okay, I get it. I now understand that these things have some value, and if I just stick it in Google and they don't give it to my children, then like, you know, what happens? I mean, it's really sad, but I routinely get emails from people that says like, you know, my dad passed away. I have an iPhone. It's on its last pin try. Can you hack it? Right? Like if we don't do this, we lose like blah, 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 this whole sort of list of things. This happens all the time. And it's like, it's just really sad and really kind of horrifying in a way that we don't have a better solution to this particular problem. But this, you know, that's one of the things I'm motivated. So it costs me money to run my own like NAS and to cycle like hard drives to cold storage and all this sort of stuff. It's inconvenient. But when you think about it from an estate planning standpoint, and having physical possession of these things means I can now actually say, here's a will. There's legal frameworks that understand physically possessed hard drives. There's a legal framework that can actually help with like when you start to have more agency and control over your own things as opposed to just leaving it all in the cloud and hoping that terms of use will protect your legacy. So that's one way I've found to help frame it. I think that gets more people motivated than just like, oh, you should care because security.
I've never thought of a digital estate before. It makes so much sense in hindsight. My mind just went click, and I was like, of course, of course. I mean, the amount of assets we have on all these contraptions and devices and hard drives and things that have over the years, even old laptops, and really fascinating. So just Keith, I saw you were going to jump off as well. Where to start learning? How do we gain more agency? Sean, I see. I'm not sure if there's other comments on that as well, but Keith, I'd be curious to get that. And then what I'd also love to do is dive into some of the questions from. I mean, we have been bringing some of the questions from the participants forward, but there's a few here that I'd love to dig into as well.
Yeah, I think Bunnie bumped into really an interesting issue that we were talking about at the Library of Congress. Is I think we're going to find there's a time where the 1920s will be better documented than the 2020s. Just because all the audio, all the pictures, all the newspapers, all those things will still be available in one of those scenarios, but not the other. But when we think about agency and getting started, I'd say there's absolutely no minimum education level. I think wherever you start, you start. It could be as simple as taking apart a light switch. Please go buy one or find one. Don't take one out of the wall. There's, as long as you're doing these things safely, like go have fun and explore. Like, when I get old hardware, I give it to my boys and I walk through, here's what it is. And I think agency comes with understanding and knowledge. I had an acquaintance of mine was driving a race car in a race, and we were watching it on YouTube. This was probably a month ago. And my boys didn't understand that building race cars is a job. And their minds were blown. They're like, wait a minute, I can build race cars for a living? And I'm like, it's a hard job. Like, it takes a lot of science and understanding, but yes, absolutely. And they were super gung-ho about that. And I think once we introduce more people to these things of like, look, there's understanding here. There's a lot of science. And we went into things like, there's materials engineering. There's the dealing with the internal combustion engine. There's aerodynamics. There's a ton of science that goes into all this. And a lot of it we can start playing with right now. When we launch model rockets, we're talking about aerodynamics. We're talking about parachutes. We're talking about these things. So even if you don't feel like you're ready to tackle, taking apart a game system or a computer, or you're afraid to, that's fine. The principles are consistent. The engineering principles haven't changed. They're the same thing as 5,000 years ago. We have better understanding. They're applied in new ways. But take it apart on a small scale, play with some hardware, see what happens. And, it doesn't take much effort or education to get started. Just curiosity.
So let me dive in on this one just to keep a foot on this, because people are responding to this. There's some questions that have been through the thread of this discussion. And again, to everybody still watching here, the hundreds of people watching, thank you. Just thank you. Your audience participation, your questions, your connections, the conversations that are running in parallel between you all. It's incredible. What an amazing community. So thank you to that. And also thank you to the panelists for this incredibly engaging conversation. A question that came through a little earlier, but there's a thread that's shown up a few times, is in the documentary, when you were talking about the iPhone 6, but and there is a request, or there's a question about modern technology, like as things are improving significantly at pace, and especially for us at Singularity, we're talking about exponential. So they're saying that things are like from the Moore's law now to quantum to the rate of change. There's even this theory that in the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to experience the same level of change that we've experienced in the last 100 years of humanity. So many new versions and iterations are coming. So is it possible to make our devices completely safe today? At least the question is, will we also know this? So we're going to play with them and hack them, and we'll get curious. Do we know what signals are being sent? The sophistication of the tech's improving. Is it safe? Is it safe for us to experiment now versus maybe some more technologies from a few years ago, because things are advancing so much? Curious on your thoughts there.
Okay, the question took an interesting turn towards it. Is it safe to play with technology now versus like how do we know if technology is safe? So there's two that I'm not sure which one it is, but basically you can always play with technology. So I don't think it's unsafe to play with technology. The question of
I think their safety. I think the question, as I interpret it, is: am I being tracked? Or is it sending signals? Will people know? Like,
how do they know if we're being? I mean, I think the answer right now to am I being tracked is yes. I mean, in some fashion, some form, whether like typically through voluntary participation in a EULA, some terms of service, just some cookie or some metadata. Everyone, it's too valuable. Everyone like that's just the answer, right? Yeah, it's hard not to be tracked today. And it's not governments that's doing it, it's corporations, right? It's just that's just how it is. So the question of can we trust our devices? That is the thing that Sean and I are working to build a device that we can trust, like the minimum viable, trustable device that can do for example, password management, TOTP authenticator token management, and ideally some secure messaging, a few things like this. So you can basically have a root of trust they can use to, for example, if you think you're being phished, you can like contact someone else with this device and know that like, no one's in between, right? Because you can actually go all the way down and pare it down into the core bits. But there is an immense amount of complexity. Like the question is like, can I take an iPhone 14 today and analyze it thoroughly? I don't think Apple can take an iPhone 14 and analyze it. You can have the Linux kernel. And if you want to analyze every single line of code, you could, but by the time you're through, it would be a different kernel, right? There'll be so many patches, so many revisions, it didn't make any sense anymore. So we've already passed the tipping point on complexity in terms of being analytically sound, in terms of understanding every little bit and piece in it, right? So we can have some heuristics. We can put things in boxes. We can go ahead and do things like we try with the introspection engine to see when signals are being sent. But like when we found in the introspection engine was like, geez, this thing's in airplane mode. The iPhone's still sending signals, right? Why? And then we look at the Apple terms of use, and oh, by the way, like so they in one version of iOS they changed the thing where they said like actually we do have the right to go ahead and send Wi-Fi and GPS signals out occasionally, and somehow that was concurrent with their decision to start a mapping product. You can maybe connect dots. I never found. I mean, that is total conspiracy theory. I don't have hard truth in it, but I'm like, these two seem too conveniently coincident, right, with each other, in terms of and then when you have vendors who have incentives like that to go ahead and use your data to build a product to compete with an incumbent product, the incentives just aren't aligned, right, in terms of just keeping that absolute sense of privacy and things. So I think there is a bit of again, this is where it goes back to sort of birds to bees and the private keys. It's like you need to understand there are limits to what we can trust and what we can keep secret, and you're going to have to prioritize. The answer, yes, and everything. I want to have downloadable games, JavaScript, click on everything, and have the world fed into my phone and have it completely be trustable because I have like no barriers at all is never going to be like it's saying I would like to just have the sewer go into my mouth please and not get sick, right? I mean, it's just you have to have a kitchen and you have to have a toilet. And yes, we can clean toilets to the point where you could eat your salad out of a toilet. We don't because there's just too much risk in doing that. And so we have to just like we teach people, potty train them, and we put the poop over here. We're going to have to teach kids like, these are the important keys you have to have, and you need to find a way to keep them safe and have a plan to pass them on, these types of things. And that's just a thing we're going to have to learn how to do this day. And when you've reduced your scope of concerns like that, then I think we can have technology that we can trust to manage those core sets. And then the good news is once we have that sort of root, that sort of nucleus of things we can go back on, the rest of the stuff we can go wild, right? Whatever, fine. My social media profile got hacked. I can post something. Oops, sorry, I got hacked, right? It happens. People understand it. I didn't lose my estate, with these types of things, or every now and then I get pwned, and that happens, right? There's a lot. It's a dangerous world out there, but it doesn't keep me from going out there and participating and living my life. But I do know that I have like a safety net that I keep the more important things in. So I think it's a combination at the end of the day, and I am worried, I am a little worried about the idea that maybe technology gets to the point where we can't analyze it anymore. Like, more and more ML designing stuff that we don't understand anymore now breaks the axiom that everything was designed by a human, right? So it may actually end up being that we have technology we don't understand anymore because some machine designed it and we don't know how it worked. It just came out. The machine gave an answer. Okay.
Yeah, Bunnie, there's a comment right here, like in flow with what you're thinking, which is, well, what might happen if companies build AI chips with some kind of a way to lock us out or to even analyze if it's being hacked or not, which is far beyond, far beyond. So just
yeah. I mean, I think if a piece of hardware is in my hands and I have access to it, I think the problem is it's not that I'm confident, is that there's enough people in the world who've tried to build hardware that they can protect when it's in your house. And enough people have broken that over time that I don't have to be cocky and say that you can't do it. Just like it's been over and over and proven that if you have full control, if you're in possession of a device, you are in possession of that device, right? So they can do all the AI they want, but you can put the AI in the matrix. You can go ahead and feed it whatever inputs you want. The AI won't be able to know the difference between you feeding it crap and versus the real world. You just disconnects its sensors and you put another sensor in it that's doing replays of it not being hacked or something like this, right? So the good news is when it's in your physical possession, I think you have some recourse. The problem is when you're now dealing with the cloud and I don't have possession of this, I don't know what's going on over there, and someone or there's another device out there that is an AI that's just feeding me answers they don't have insight into where they're coming from, how it's generated. Then we start to kind of stare into this kind of new void of the unknown. I don't know where that goes. I'm not terminally afraid of it because part of it also is that while we had this wonderful rise in technology, a lot of it can be just accounted for by Moore's law. And trust me, Moore's law does not have a lot more to give, right? We are really, really wringing the last bits out of our silicon right now. So I'm not too terribly afraid. And quantum computers are cool and all, but they're basically a physics experiment. You're not going to get one in your pocket. We can go into that for various. There's a long debate, but so in a way that gives me a little solace. I sleep better at night knowing that I think that maybe we don't have so much of that void to stare into at the end of the day. But it also means that it may be time for us to start to think about, technology is going to the dust is going to settle, and now is the time to actually draft laws and norms and social practices that sort of concrete, so cement this into a solid foundation as opposed to us sort of teetering on a single, sort of tip of a pin right now as we do. It's really, we have an opportunity, I think, right now actually to sort of to make a robust society that we work on technology, and technology is now equivalent to like a human right, and it's treated in a way that we manage it and we provide it and we acknowledge its role. It's like fire and these types of things, right? And we embrace it in that way, as opposed to, again, like I said, turning it into the magic in the church. I talk a lot. I'm sorry.
No, it's excellent. There's so many streams. We have about 7 minutes to go. And what I'd love to do is, there are so many questions that have come through on both the event chat and the stage chat, and just such excellent questions. I think you hitting so many points across them. What I'd love to do just in this last few minutes for you all is let's move into a place of and I'd love to hear from each of you as we wrap here, which is big audience here. We've had 1,600 people, registered for this. Hundreds showed up today. It's really, really incredible, the turnout for the movement. People are curious. People are hungry for information. The questions are fantastic. Everything from ethics to what do I do to here's my thinking on things. And, I know after this event, one can even take a look at the chat stream. It's just so powerful. Advice from this panel. What could the people here do next? There was questions for recommended readings and how do I take this forward? And people are here at various levels. There were people speaking in code I don't even understand, mentioning pieces of technology. but all the way to like, how do I begin? You know, how do I keep this movement going? How do I continue this forward? I'd love to hear from each of you. What would you say is the best advice? Because a movement has begun. And I think you raised so many powerful points here about taking control, stepping into your power, tapping into your curiosity, taking care of your legacy and your agency, you know, really asking questions, challenging what's in front. Don't just take things as face value. Really kind of dig into where things are going and where they come from. So just get educated, you know, get empowered, go out, start a movement, put your findings out there, get more transparency going. There's so many golden threads that have come through from here today. What can people do next? You know, what are you doing next? I'd be very curious about that. What are you doing next to keep all of this momentum going? But what can people do next? Love to hear from you. Let's go around. Keith, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. What I'm doing next is I have home solar and battery backup at my house that the company has not given me the admin interface for. So I've got Wireshark on my network collecting all the data. I already found all the read-only interfaces. Now I'm trying to find the admin interface to be able to dork around with that. So I'd say play with your devices, explore, figure out what traffic they're sending out, experiment. You know, get a dead one from, you know, Goodwill or something and see what you can do with it. Hit garage sales, explore. And I'd say that's sort of at a personal individual level. I would say at a family level, encourage the kids around you, encourage, you know, nephews, nieces, whatever, your sons, daughters, whatever. I don't care. Encourage them to play, not just with, you know, technology. Encourage them to like teach them what a pulley does. Teach them like core, fundamental, simple machines like that. And they'll realize that there's foundations to all of this and there's room to explore. And if you teach them well and you show them these things, they'll take it deeper over time. I'm super biased. I'm a startup guy. I've been through Twilio and Okta and I'm at Ngrok. I'm looking to hire people who are willing to push boundaries. Like that's what I want. So I think it can benefit society as a whole and it'll benefit your career to just, you know, check assumptions. See if that thing is locked down as tight as you think it is. It's probably not.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Ja-naé, what are you doing next, and what would you encourage people to do next?
Well, actually, after this panel is done, we're going to go break stuff downstairs. So that's absolutely next. But what I'm doing is, again, like within academia, you know, it's providing those opportunities for students, putting up even cash prizes of my own money so that we end up having more students coming and exploring, working with organizations so that they can start to incorporate more of these open innovation, open hackathons, not only with their employees, but also with users or consumers who might be interested. So it's a bit of an education that that goes on there. But I would say for every single individual, it's not about a book, right? I think Bunnie had said that earlier. It's about going and trying. And I think that that's a first step for anyone if you haven't done that already. And then if you're looking to create a space for just for folks to share knowledge, for them to mess around, like go create a meetup, go into a Twitter space and, and because I saw someone had mentioned that, and start to share some of your own knowledge of what you've worked on, what you've explored. And much like what got Bunnie in trouble in the first place, right? It is that osmosis of knowledge and the sharing of knowledge that is needed. And there was a comment also by Catherine around behavioral tech. So, I mean, that's an area where I spend a lot of my time in, and where my expertise lies. And I would say that as we're thinking about behavioral tech, because I like to stay positive, but I'm not always positive about those things. What I would say is, this is really where even just having conversations around what are the ways in which we can utilize behavioral tech, instead of just the ways in which we normally view them, around both data collection and shareholder value. I mean, I think that begins with a conversation. So these are things that anyone and everyone can do, and it doesn't matter if you sit inside an organization or if you're sitting at home homeschooling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you. Sean, what are you doing next, and what would you recommend people do next?
The next thing I'm doing is working on a wireless debugger project that I've got doing, and it's I'm hoping to crowdfund it soon. But it kind of dovetails into what my advice for getting into things is. It's been a recurring theme here. Play, do what you can to play around with it. And it may be that in order to play, you have to design your own playground. So a lot of times, even when you are working with the big corporate tools to design a system, they often have this very brittle pieces of software or systems that are used to design their tools. And even the people designing the software or the systems may not have the best tools. In fact, ask anyone working for a big company, hey, do you like working with Synopsys or the chip design tools? They'll all say they're awful because they're not built by people to have fun. They're built by people to do a project. And so if you play, you get to build your own tools. And you get to design tools that you enjoy, and that gives you a better understanding about how the systems work, more so than the people, I've said this before, more so than the people who designed the systems to begin with, which is why, this debugger project I'm working on, I'm learning all sorts of things about how various chips work on a very low level. And it's going to be really useful coming up for any other projects where I need to be able to reverse engineer a project, because I'll understand how to work on it from the inside, whereas somebody else might only know how to get the one debug box from Sega for $1,500. My little device that I built, it can do it just fine without needing to spend all that money and buy 3 of them to break one and have one to understand and then one to actually use.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Bunnie, to bring us home, the Hacktivist. This has been such an inspiring time together. Bunnie, what are you doing next? What would you recommend people do next? And and let's keep this movement and message going.
Sure. I think we talked a bit about what I'm doing next. I'm working on this little device here, so I won't belabor that too much. I think what I want everyone to do is I want everyone to type Control-Shift-I right now in their browser if you haven't done that before. If you're on Chrome or Firefox, it should work, and you will see a console pop up that shows you a whole bunch of things like security errors in the site, cross-origin requests, all the sort of things that are actually broken in the background while we're having our conversation. You can click on a tabbed inspector that will go ahead and show you the different regions of the page that correspond to different code that's running behind it. And in doing this, I do this sometimes, you just go to a banking website and do it wherever it is. Just pull the covers off, right? The tool is actually right there. It's just one hotkey away, the developer tools. And you can start to see that technology isn't this polished thing that we see above. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on the inside, and there's tools you can use to analyze it because it's built by people who need these tools. We leave these here because the people who built it want to know how it broke. You can use it to understand what's going on the inside. So from the software standpoint, I find, if this is, you can actually in that console, you can type things and query JavaScript variables and change the behavior of the page, break things. If you can't copy paste out of a website, you can actually set a little variable sometimes and enable the copy paste. It's all possible. And so, from the software standpoint, that's a thing you can do. From the hardware standpoint, there's actually, I think I'm going to plug just a couple of books here that I didn't write them. I don't get any kickback on this, but there's recently actually a book by Eric Schleifer and Wendell Oskay called Open Circuits that it's just being released. You can pre-order right now. And it's the most beautiful collection of cross sections of electronics you've ever seen. Like, they do the hard work of opening things up for you and showing how things are built on the inside. Like, I wish I had that book as a kid. It was I've just been staring at the images over and over again. Like, as someone who has been around the block a few times, I'm looking at images and go like, that's how it works. I've never seen it that way before. Like even, you know, I'm kind of finding a new love for things I thought was very pedestrian before, because they open it in such an artistic and beautiful way. Or, you know, get it, and it's a book that's appropriate for kids and adults. You don't have to have a PhD to understand it. Like, you can just look at the art and just be like, it's beautiful, and that's all you need to know. Or if you want, get a book like, you know, Randall Moreau makes what if you go to XKCD Comics, he takes absurd questions and answers them with physics, and so you actually get an idea of the process of the mind of sort of scientific experimentation. There's no boundaries to the question he tries to answer. He answers those craziest things with like formal methods, and it's a way to sort of make things more accessible, more fun, a little haha, a little more get into it types of things. And I find these wonderful little things that exist here, like just opening the debug console, finding these like little picture guides, whatever it is, these things that make technology a little more relatable, a little more immediate, is the very first step. That first step is oftentimes the hardest step to take. Just do it, and then what you'll find is you'll find a calling, you'll hear a voice, you'll feel that on the inside, and just follow that pull. Just follow it, and if you really feel that pull deeply inside, I don't think it can lead you wrong. Like, don't worry about the little label that says warranty void. Don't worry about these types of things. Like, there's a lot of resources out there to help you if you break it on the internet, right? It's just follow that voice, and I think it'll lead you to a good place. So.
Incredible. Well, first of all, on behalf of myself, I'm giving all of you a round of applause. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for showing up here and just bringing 100%. Sean, Bunnie, I know this is an obscene hour for you, so thank you for showing up. Keith, I'm not actually sure of your time zone right now, so I'm not sure if it's late or early, but because it's just you're in the dark void right there in the background. He's in space. But thank you so much. First and foremost, on behalf of Singularity University, Wildtype Media, all the participants and everybody, thank you. Thank you for an extraordinary session, an extraordinary discussion. We are honored to have had this proximity to you all and to have this discussion. Everybody in the chat stream, show some love, give some emojis, some high fives, some hand claps. Tell everybody how much this meant to you. This is really great. If you see in the chat stream as well, for those, you'll notice that the links to the Hactivist have been put up on Vimeo and on YouTube. They are there. They will also be circulated in a post communication. So please do share with your networks. I saw a lot of people requesting that they want to share with groups and schools and kids and their communities. So it's begun. Push the button. It's begun. The ripple effect has begun. And this is what it's all about. Staying curious, getting into our play, asking questions, and pushing on. So to all the future budding hacktivists here on this session as well, and to Bunnie and to Sean and Ja-naé and Keith, thank you so very, very much for your time and your wisdom. And we are so excited to see what happens next. And with that, we just again want to say thank you on behalf of Singularity Group, and for everybody out there, keep the conversation going. If you've got questions, reach out, and there'll be some more communications on how you can stay in touch. I know that a lot of people here were asking about your profiles. We have them in for the panelist profiles. We have them in the reception area. We put them in the chat stream. So please, I'm sure you're going to be inundated with people wanting to connect. So with that, have an amazing rest of the day. Have a great sleep to Sean and Bunnie. And thank you very much. And with this, we can declare this closed for the day. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate you all.